She says I'm on. Okay. This is a modified talk that I gave to a Kiwanis club 3 or 4 years ago about a charity that I did work for almost 20 years. The generic name for it is Angel Flight. A lot of the organizations have changed their names over the years, but we still use the generic term Angel Flight. So imagine yourself a victim of a rare cancer, and you've been accepted at MD Anderson out in Houston for clinical trials. You're a sales clerk in Ocala, Florida, but you have to spend 2 days every 3 weeks for 8 months in Houston. What are your options? You can move to Houston. Not many people have the freedom to do that. And remember, you're a sales clerk. There's no air service between Ocala and Houston. You'd have to drive to Gainesville, catch a flight, minimum round trip fare, $509. Remember that you're a sales clerk. But is there a charity that can take you to Houston and back every 3 weeks for 8 months? Yes, there is. Yes, there's an air charity network. It's the umbrella organization for a whole bunch of other organizations. This was originally called Angel Flight America, but they changed their name about 10 years ago to Air Charity Network. I'll tell you why in a little bit. It's the umbrella organization for a number of volunteer organizations of general aviation pilots who do just this type of service. Air Charity is about 45 years old. Its purpose is stated here is to provide free transportation to people in 3 kinds of need: medical, family, or national crisis. The Air Charity Network doesn't fly any missions. They provide centralized communication, coordination, and support to 8 regional Angel Flight organizations. Now you see 9 of them there, but one of them is really all one, but changed into 2. I'll get into that too. It's at this level that the pilots are recruited and that the patients are screened and the missions are set up. From the map, you can see that I flew for Mercy Flight Southeast. Actually, it's Angel Flight Southeast. It includes Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida. It's based in Leesburg, Florida, which is right about here. And they still operate as Angel Flight Southeast in Florida. That's why it's a different color. But these 4 are now Mercy Flight Southeast. The name change, if you can believe it, came out of a lawsuit. There's a lady up in Atlanta who started an Angel Flight organization named Angel Flight Georgia. And it's separate. It's under the Air Charity Network, but it's separate from the other Angel Flight organizations. And she sued us, Angel Flight Southeast, for stealing the name of her organization. So we just, rather than spending money on that kind of lawsuit, we just reincorporated these 4 wings, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina, as Mercy Flight Southeast. So I was not allowed to wear any Angel Flight stuff or anything after that name change. I still have my Angel Flight t-shirt, but so we operated as Mercy Flight Southeast, but it's really just one organization here, and that's what I flew for. And I still call it Angel Flight because she can't sue me here. Here's what we do at Mercy Flight Southeast. There's 7 employees in Leesburg. They're paid employees. And in the 5 states handled by Mercy Flight Southeast, or Angel Flight, there's about 1,000 volunteer workers, but only about 200 volunteer pilots, and that's not nearly enough for the available missions. Because Mercy Flight began in Florida, most of our pilots are from that state. You notice I'm using the present tense. I resigned. I gave up my volunteer status about 1.5 years ago, but all my notes still say are. So present tense, would you use that? Most of our missions at Mercy Flight, at Angel Flight, Mercy Flight, originate, or terminate there in Florida. It's not that the need doesn't exist in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. It does. But because the organization's been operating out of Central Florida for over 20 years, the healthcare professionals in Florida are more aware of their existence and that they're more active in recommending patients to fly. These are the 7 mission types that we carried out. Some are regional, and some require pilots to specifically volunteer to fly them. I'll talk about each one a little bit and get into some individual examples. But these are the 7 mission types that we fly. Medical flights are our bread and butter. The typical medical passenger is a person who has to travel long distances frequently, for whom the cost of commercial flight would be prohibitive. That's that example I gave you about the sales clerk, say in Florida, who has to go to MD Anderson every 3 weeks. That's the kind of people that we fly. The second type is compassion flights. These are not really medical, but they're just as important because the screening for these flights is just as stringent as for the medical flights. The medical flights, there is a screening process. I don't want to get into that, but that's what the staff in Leesburg does. Somebody will apply for a Mercy flight or an Angel flight. The doctor has to request it. They have to fill out all kinds of questionnaires, and then there's a vetting process that I'm really not all that familiar with, but they just determine who is eligible, and then others, they may say, no, you're not really eligible for this. And the compassion flights are the same way, but certified social workers take the place of the healthcare professionals in certifying these folks. Transplant services. We don't fly organs. It says right here, I think it says somewhere in there. Yeah, we do not fly organs. That's somebody else does that. But if a patient is waiting for a heart or a kidney or a liver or a lung or something like that, and they are vetted as qualified for a Mercy flight, then Leesburg will assign 3 to 5 pilots, volunteer pilots, to that one person. And the reason for that is when the organ becomes available, the pilots will get a call. The first pilot on the list will get a call. Say, we got an organ for John Smith. Can you get him in the air within an hour? No, I can't. So they call the second guy. Can you get him in the air within an hour? Yeah, I can do it. Okay. So that pilot then has to get a weather briefing, file a flight plan, get to the airport, load the passenger, and get off the ground within an hour. I did not volunteer for this because that's for the young and restless, and I was a little old for that. But anyway, we do fly those. We've got a lot of guys in Florida who are signed up for the transplant missions, and they get them done. Unfortunately, this is a type of mission that's sadly necessary. Fortunately, I never had to fly one. These are fun. I like the special camps missions. The kids that go to these special camps, they're all this is a medical mission, really. They all have some kind of condition, and they're special camps. I'm going to tell you about this little girl later on. But the thing about this one is there have to be 2 adults in the airplane with one of these kids. I'm going to tell you about this guy too later. These are good missions. I love these. They're gratifying. They're fun. Most of the volunteer pilots kept these little Angel Flight teddy bears. You know, they got the goggles and they got the scarf, the little teddy bear. And we give them to the kids to give them something to play with on the flight. these are getting to be a big part of our service, disaster relief. They're made under a cooperative program with the Department of Homeland Security called HSEATS, H-S-E-A-T-S, the Homeland Security Emergency Air Transportation System. That's a government acronym, you know, they got a lot of those. But the Angel Flight organizations are the primary providers of these HSEATS missions, these disaster relief missions. Mercy Flight Southeast and the South Central Angel Flight Southeast, we flew over 500 of these missions after Katrina. Most of these, about 2/3 of these missions are flying medical supplies and personnel, relief personnel into the affected area, and about 1/3 of them are flying evacuees out. And that's our 7 mission types. Now, let me introduce you to some of the reasons we do what we do. This little kid, Aaron Mandel, this kid was born in Pensacola, Florida, and he had a condition called cranial stenosis. The medical folks know what that is. He didn't have a soft spot in his head like most newborns do. And he had to have an operation to put one there. But then he had to wear this helmet for first 14 months of his life. He had to wear that thing, that strange looking little helmet there. But that thing had to be adjusted every week for the first 14 months of his life. Now he lived in Pensacola, but he had to get to Atlanta to have it adjusted. His mother, that's Marilyn Mandel, she quit her job to look after him and get him back and forth to the adjustments. And they're not very well off. The Mandels, I can't remember what his father did, but without Mercy Flight, without Angel Flight, they'd have been in a world of hurt. Aaron's we called Aaron a frequent flyer. We had a lot of those. Now, as I said earlier, not all of our passengers are patients. This girl is Ashley Robinson. She lives in Altamonte Springs, Florida. And she's an example of a compassion flight. Her little girl, her infant daughter, was airlifted to Nashville, Tennessee for open heart surgery at Vanderbilt. Ashley's only way to get there to be with the baby was Angel Flight. Now, I learned a valuable lesson on this flight. This girl, she looks pretty chipper in this photograph, but let me tell you, she was a basket case. I put her in the co-pilot seat right next to me. She grabbed hold of the yoke the whole way, and she was holding it like a gorilla. And I couldn't even move the rudder pedals because her feet were down like this. It was a tough flight. But I did learn that lesson. And after that, I put passengers in the back seat unless I knew they were really up to snuff. I got to tell you about this guy. This is David Perkins. He was a frequent flyer from Fort Walton Beach, Florida. And he was going up to the University of Virginia Cancer Center. I think I flew him on 2 different missions. First time I flew him, I showed up at the FBO, the fixed base operators, where you buy gas for your airplane. Showed up there, and the building was full of police and sheriff deputies and guys standing around in blue suits with curly wires coming out of their ears. So I went out to one of the linemen, and they were taking all the airplanes off the ramp. And I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, the vice president's coming in to make a speech. That's Secret Service in there, and they're making us put all the airplanes get all the airplanes off the ramp." Well, I said, "I got an Angel Flight coming in. He said, "Well," so I went and found the head Secret Service agent, and I explained what was going on. He said, "Well, you can leave your plane there, but it's got to go before Air Force 2 comes in." I said, "Okay, we'll get him out." Well, it turns out that the Angel Flight Mid-Atlantic flight did get here in time and got him out, and I was putting his luggage into my plane. He said, "I got to go to the bathroom." So I told him where it was in the FBO. So he goes in, and I get his luggage in, and I go back in, and here he comes across the room, and he's shoving Secret Service agents out of the way like they're stray cats, you know. And the head agent was giving me the evil eye. He said, "Is that your passenger?" I said, "Yeah, that's my passenger. We're out of here." So I got out there, and I got into the plane. I said, "David, did you know that those were Secret Service guys you were shoving around?" He said, "Man, I'm stage 3 melanoma. You think I'm afraid of the Secret Service? You got No. One thing I didn't expect when I volunteered for this was the number of rare diseases that I would learn about. This is Carolyn Clemens and her husband Philip. Carolyn suffers from a disease, very rare disease called RSD. Anybody know what that is? Reflex sympathetic dystrophy syndrome. I never heard of it. It was first diagnosed during the war between the states, and I've found very few doctors who've ever even heard of it. But it's a horrible affliction, and it causes agonizing pain in the extremities, in the hands and feet. Carolyn said it's kind of like dipping your hand down into a bucket full of molten lead. That's what and she said when it starts, you cannot stop it. It goes on for days. And in fact, I flew 2 RSD patients. Carolyn, she was the first one. She's a registered nurse, and she didn't know about it. And it took her 2 years to get a diagnosis. She lives in Kentucky, and she travels regularly to a pain clinic in southern Florida that specializes in RSD. There's a lot of pain clinics in Florida. I found that. And, so maybe she got addicted to morphine or whatever they were giving her, but who cares? If you've got that kind of pain, you've got to have something. This was the special camp flight. You saw this photo earlier. This little girl had a skin disease, and she was taking some kind of medicine that made her skin puff up. She wasn't really all that chubby. And she'd been to a summer camp for chronically ill children set up by Richard Petty up here in North Carolina. The guy with me there is Dr. Gene Kelly. He's a retired anesthesiologist. And I was trying to recruit him as an Angel Flight co-pilot, because it's always good to have somebody with a medical background on these flights with you, especially with all the patients that we fly. Didn't work out. It turned out this picture was taken at the airport on St. Simon's Island. We picked up Luz. Her name is Luz Seaman. We picked her up here in Greensboro, and flew her and handed her off to another Angel Flight pilot at St. Simon's to take her on down to her home in Florida. Turns out Gene he had a favorite restaurant on St. Simon's Island that he wanted to go to that day. So I didn't get him recruited. And Mary Wayne knows what the restaurant is because she's been there too. Some of the areas in Angel Flight organizations are lucky enough to have medical people who do fly as co-pilots for these missions, weight and room restrictions permitting. Anyway, now, this is one where I really did wish I had a medical professional on board. This guy he's Kenneth Mann, and he lived in Macon, where I was based. And he was a heavy smoker, just something like 4 packs a day. He was down in Jacksonville at Mayo Clinic being evaluated for a lung transplant. You can see we got his oxygen line there. His lung function was so poor that it took us about 15 minutes to get him into. My airplane's fairly small, and you got to be a little nimble to get into it. It's kind of like a sports car. It took us 15 minutes to get him and all that oxygen equipment in there. But finally, I put him on the back seat because he had a lot of stuff with him. And after I took off, the weather was bad, and Jacksonville airspace is real crowded, and I was a one-armed paper hanger there for a long time. But we finally got up to altitude, and Jacksonville turned us loose, and so I turned around to check on him, and I turned around and looked back there, and I thought, oh God, I've lost one. I thought, I have lost a patient. He's back there dead on the back seat. So I reached back to check his pulse, and as soon as I touched his wrist, he came alive and said, are we in Macon yet? The funny thing is, this guy, he got the lung transplant, but he didn't stop smoking. He died from emphysema 2 years later. We don't want to know. Andrew Sterling. This is a disaster relief mission. It was Katrina. That's his wife, Kim. We're in Marietta, Georgia here. But Andrew and Kim, they lived in New Orleans, and then Katrina was coming. And Kim says, Andrew, we got to get out of here. He said, no, he worked for the gas company. He said, no, they're going to need me here after this storm comes through. She grabbed the kids, put them in the car, and headed for her mother's house in Marietta, Georgia. So Andrew stayed. 2 days later, he wakes up from a nap, and there's 2 feet of water in his bedroom, and his dog is paddling around trying to get onto the bed. He got out of the house and was walking down. He told me all of this in the 5 minutes that he was awake while he was with me. He was wading down the street and water up to his armpits, and a boat came along, picked him up. They took him to the football stadium in
Superdome.
the Superdome. Took him to the Superdome, and he sneaked onto one of the evacuation buses just as it was leaving. When I picked him up, he had spent 3 weeks in a gym in Houston, Texas. Was it Houston? No, Dallas. He'd spent 3 weeks in a high school gymnasium in Dallas. He hadn't had a wink of sleep. I don't think he was awake more than 5 minutes the whole time he was in the plane. You might have guessed that my favorite passengers are the kids. I love flying the kids. This little girl, Lisa Watkins, had a very strange disease, another one I never heard of, called opsoclonus myoclonus. Ever heard of that? Most pediatricians have seen at least one case of it. Her eyes, she couldn't keep her eyes still. They were just everywhere. She couldn't even look you in the face because her eyes were always moving. And because of that, when she walked, it looked like she'd been drinking a lot. She staggered a lot. But she's cute as a bug. I did find out later, I talked to an obstetrician, he said, yeah, it's a real weird condition. He said, but most kids outgrow it. I said, good. That's her dad, Mike, with her. Now this guy lived in Macon, and his parents were friends of ours. We've known him all of his life. He was born with retinitis pigmentosa. He's totally blind. I flew him on 4 missions. He was going to a clinic in Connecticut. There was a Russian doctor up there that thought he had a treatment for retinitis pigmentosa. Injections in the eyeball and all of that. So, Mark went up there several times for these treatments. Unfortunately, it wasn't all that successful. But on one trip back, I picked him up at a little airport in Virginia, and we were flying over the North Carolina mountains, and he looked, oh, I got to tell you, I was telling some folks about this earlier. On the first time I flew him, I'd known Mark all of his life, and he was sitting in the co-pilot seat. He's blind as a bat. He can't see anything. And he said, can I fly the plane? I said, yeah, sure. Just here's the yoke, here's the rudder pedals. Just keep it straight and level, and let's try to keep our altitude within 500 feet, or they'll call us from air traffic control. And he did. He's sitting there, and of course, it was straight and level. I said, now we got a turn coming up here. We're coming up on a waypoint. We need to turn 25 to the right, 25 degrees to the right. So, okay, tell me when to start. I said, okay, start now. He cranked the yoke over, and pretty good turn, it was nice and smooth. It's okay, that's it, that's 25 degrees, okay. He did it. I mean, he didn't lose 20 feet. He made a beautiful turn. I was impressed. But anyway, we were coming back, picked him up in Virginia, we were coming back over the North Carolina mountains. He said, what are those white lines I see down there? So I turned over and looked. It was ski trails. We were over a ski resort, and he saw the ski trails. So maybe the treatments did do a little bit for him. And this is Vargas, best passenger I ever had. That dog is amazing. Anyway, if you're interested in Angel Flights or Mercy Flight, you can get involved. Check the website listed. Oh, this is Mid-Atlantic. This is I've changed this slide. This is the one that includes North Carolina. So if you think you might like to get involved, check the website listed here. Mercy Medical, they've changed their name again. They've got a program called Earth Angels. You don't have to be a pilot. These are the people who pick up the patients and take them to the airport, and take them from the airport and take them home. They do all kinds of, they're earth angels, and there's a lot of them that do that sort of thing. If you're a pilot, go ahead and volunteer. I'm retired, I don't do that anymore. If you're a medical professional, Meg, Molly, is Molly here? Yeah. If you're a medical professional, they can use you. You know, you can be a co-pilot, because a lot of the medical flights really need somebody with medical background on board. If you can't do any of that, send money. All the Angel Flight organizations are 501c3s. Everything you send them is completely deductible. It's just something that's worth doing. Any questions?
I have.
No question. Oh.
You, in that last slide, it listed ground transportation.
Yeah, that's the Earth Angels.
Oh, they call them Earth Angels?
Yeah, they just call them Earth Angels. They're Angel Flight volunteers. They don't fly, but they do other things. You know, the people have got to get, the passengers have got to get from the home to the airport, from the airport home. And I'm not that familiar with the Earth Angel program, but there's a lot of work that they do. As I said in the very beginning, Angel Flight Southeast has over 1,000 volunteers in the Earth Angel program.
Is that strictly in the United States, or do you fly internationally?
It's mostly in the United States. We flew a lot of disaster relief missions in the Bahamas and Puerto Rico from hurricanes, but yeah, no, it's just U.S. I don't know that we go into Canada. I was too far away to do any flights into Canada, but there may be some out of Canada into the U.S. or the other way around. I really don't know.
If there's a potential patient, say in Massachusetts, who needs a treatment in Texas,
yeah,
right, able to get them there, it would require
Absolutely.
several plane changes.
Yeah, that's a good question. The typical mission, let me go all the way back here to the map. Oops.
Yeah, that map, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of our missions ended in Houston, MD Anderson, and a lot in Jacksonville. There's a lot of them that go up to Rochester, where's the Mayo? Yeah, Rochester, Wisconsin. Yes, those would be 2 or 3 leg trips. Like Mark Mann, for instance, he was going from Macon, Georgia to a place up here in Connecticut. That was a 2-leg trip. I would fly him from Macon up to a little airport in Virginia. An Angel Flight Mid-Atlantic pilot would pick him up there and take him on up to Connecticut. And coming back, another 2-leg trip. Some of them are even 3-leg trips. But
are you reimbursed for the expenses? This
no.
would be pretty darn magnanimous of you if you did all this all the time on your tab.
No, I'm not reimbursed for anything.
That's wonderful.
The entire cost of the flight is borne by the volunteer pilot. But I always like to say the IRS paid for my fuel, because my flights are totally deductible, and it costs a lot to own a little an airplane, even one as small as mine was. I kept very accurate records of every dime I ever spent on that airplane, and my CPA told me that every expense except my hangar expense was deductible for Angel Flights. And so the fuel, all my maintenance amortized over the number of hours that I flew, all the expenses on a per hour basis. I kept track of all the hours. Of course, pilots always keep track of the hours they fly. But I would have a spreadsheet at the end of the year of all my Angel Flight expenses, and the tax deduction was just about equal to what I spent on the fuel. So, yeah. But no, it's the volunteer pilot pays for all of it. There were a few tries, a few attempts to get some kind of fuel reimbursement put in, but I don't think that ever happened.
Boy, in a typical year, how many of these flights did you do?
When I was much younger, a lot of them. as I aged, it was like 2 or 3 a year. The most I ever flew, I flew 14 missions one year. And they made me Georgia Pilot of the Year, but I got a little plaque, nice little plaque that's hanging on the wall. But no, there are some pilots, there's some guys down in Florida here who've flown hundreds of missions. There's a guy out in Texas named Jacobson. Oh, my laser's not working. And something Jacobson, his father founded an electronics company and left him $200 million or something. And he bought a Cessna Citation, and that's all he does is fly Angel flights. So, and I got to tell you, I picked up a passenger. I met him on 2 occasions. The first time, he had picked up somebody, I think they were out in Nevada somewhere, and for some reason, he flew them. I picked them up down here in Gulf Shores, Alabama, but they were going up here to Marietta, Georgia, and that's a fairly simple leg for my flight. But he had flown them in a Learjet from somewhere in Nevada down to Gulf Shores. Those 2 girls got it, and there were 2 of them. They got out of the airplane, and they had been shopping in Las Vegas or wherever they were. They must have had packages and suitcases, and you've seen a picture of my airplane. Well, I mean, now that's a Grumman Tiger, and it has a very nice payload. I can carry a lot of weight in that airplane. But these girls were just loaded up. I put the little luggage compartment back here. I had that all the way up to the ceiling. I had everything I could get in the co-pilot seat. I put the 2 of them in the back seat, and they had packages up to the ceiling in their laps. So I've forgotten what was the question. Yeah, it's Angel Flight, when they vet a passenger, tells him you and no more than 50 pounds of luggage, because a lot of our airplanes they're small. They're general aviation aircraft. But I know, I was talking about this guy Jacobson. He flies these things all the time. He started out in a Beechcraft King Air, and he's up to a Cessna Citation now. But I don't know how many he's flown, but we got 60. I think I flew about 65 missions. And yeah.
If I'm remembering right, isn't the goal to have a pilot back home that night?
Yeah.
In most cases.
Doesn't always happen. Doesn't always happen.
Right.
For a person my age, these flights can be kind of grueling. Like the kid, Aaron Mandel, that time I flew him, I was supposed to go to Atlanta and pick him up and fly them back to Pensacola. 8 o'clock in the morning of the flight, the guy from Atlanta, who was supposed to go to Pensacola and take them up, called me and said, "I'm backing out." He said, "The weather's too bad in Atlanta. I can't fly it. We got icing here. It's cold. It's cloudy. It's rain. I can't fly it." I said, "Whoa! What have you checked with the mother?" And he said, "Yeah, she's kind of upset. I guess so." So I called her, and she was a basket case. She said, I don't know what we're going to do." I said, "Look, can you get your appointment changed to 2 o'clock this afternoon? I can get you to Atlanta for a 2 o'clock appointment." So she came back 15 minutes later and said, "Yeah, I got a 2 o'clock appointment." So I filed a flight plan, hopped in my plane, and headed to Pensacola, and I flew him to Atlanta. Sure enough, I did pick up some ice getting in there, but that airplane can handle a lot, and I got him in. So I'd flown from Macon to Pensacola to Atlanta. They went to their appointment, got the helmet adjusted, came back, and I flew them back to Pensacola, and I was bushed. I mean, it was like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the afternoon when I got them back, and I was just worn out. So I got myself a motel room and called Mary Wayne and said, "I'll be home tomorrow." And flew back the next morning. But yeah, normally it's a one-day thing.
Floyd, there's an organization of people with corporate aircraft
That's a
that
corporate
transport
angel.
people, and
Corporate
we did
angel,
that.
yeah.
Is there a communication or coordination between Mercy Flight and the corporate program?
not between Angel Flight as such, but there is coordination. It's corporate air network is what you're talking about, and that is, they do work with the Air Charity Network, because some of those flights are actually more than one leg. So yeah, there's a bunch of these places out there. But the corporate air network those are typically 1,000-mile
Yes.
missions. You know, somebody from Chicago needs to get to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
They'll check with CAN to see if that's available. If it's not, one thing I didn't say about Air Charity Network, if they can't get it done through Angel Flight organizations, they do have, there is a, let me see, I got it here. There's even a 15th organization. There's one called Mercy Medical Angels, and Air Charity Network will work with them and get them a free airline ticket. That's where, you know, they get contributions, and 501c3, people give money, and when they can't work out an Angel Flight or a corporate air network flight, they'll buy them a ticket. So, you know, there's all kinds of ways to get them there.
Boyd, how many patients, individuals do you think in this whole network they serve every year?
Oh, good Lord. Thousands.
Thousands?
Yeah, they're in the thousands. Angel Flight Southeast, you know, every day when I was a volunteer pilot, every morning I could open up my email and there was a list of missions available. And there were 100 to 200 of them every morning.
Wow.
And I could pick the one, you know, pick the one I wanted to fly, or there's one that I didn't. But no, it's got to be thousands, and it's not enough. The need is, you know, 10 times what Angel Flight does. Herb?
We all, I'm sure, get multiple solicitations during the course of any month for supposed nonprofits, many of which I don't think are nonprofits. This comes across to me as probably a true nonprofit, but why don't more of us know of this? You know, just the group here tonight, I think, thinks, man, this is really worthwhile.
Well, you see these ads, you know, for $19 a month, you can save this puppy. You know, you see all those ads. They've got the money to put those ads up. Angel Flight doesn't. And 99% of the money that goes to Angel Flight goes into the charity. They're not going to spend money on that kind of thing. Now, we do get some publicity. I've seen segments on Today. In fact, I had a DVD on my original thing for this. I had a little DVD of a thing that the Today Show had done about Angel Flight. But that's about it. Most of it comes from the medical people. A doctor, you know, will have a patient that needs the services. The doctors know about Angel Flight, and they refer the patients to it.
After Katrina, you mentioned that you were flying supplies in. Was there a great exodus via Mercy flights?
Well, as I said, on the disaster relief, about 2/3 of the flights are just flying people in, emergency people and supplies and everything. Oh gosh, after Katrina and after Michael, I'd have page after page after page of missions, of these disaster relief missions. Most of them were stuff going in, not coming out. But there's not that much evacuation really after a disaster like that. But there's a huge need for getting people in, emergency workers, and we did a lot of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.